Chaos Child is a visual novel developed by 5PB and was originally released in 2014. The plot of Chaos Child begins approximately 6 years after the events in Chaos Head, where a sudden earthquake ripped through Shibuya and nearly leveled it entirely. The main character of the game is Takuru Miyashiro, the leader of his school's newspaper club and one of the survivors of the disaster. When a series of bizarre murders start occurring on the same dates as the one in Chaos Head, Takuru launches an investigation, but soon begins to drag himself and his friends further and further into a dangerous plot. Right off the bat, you're probably wondering if it's necessary to play Chaos Head before getting into this one. While playing the first game does add some backstory and texture to this world, it's not a prerequisite, and Chaos Child does a good job of explaining anything important it needs to. This is definitely a good thing, as Chaos Head was never officially released in English, and tracking down and using a fan patch isn't the easiest thing in the world to do. As the fourth entry in the Science Adventure series, preceded by Chaos Head, Steins Gate, and Robotics Notes, Chaos Child certainly had a lot to live up to, and it didn't disappoint. While I certainly can't rate it higher than Steins Gate, I can easily put it at a close second in the series. The story is helped immensely by an excellent translation by newer game publisher P-Cube. However, it is marred somewhat by numerous typos and typographical errors. These are all fairly minor things like missing spaces or names accidentally switched around, but there are enough of them to be noticeable. I also noticed a couple instances of text remaining untranslated. The locations on the map of Shibuya in one of the endings, for example, but these are extremely rare. Hopefully all of these small issues will be patched in the future, but even if they remain, they aren't bad enough to do much damage to this game. Chaos Child doesn't give you choices to make like a typical visual novel would. Instead, the game will show you a prompt that will allow you to make 3 choices: positive, negative, or neutral. These choices will change the events of the story and has a great influence over which ending you get after the regular one. While Chaos Head was originally a thriller/supernatural story, the writers decided to go a different route this time around and made Chaos Child into a horror game instead. While the supernatural elements still exist, this is the same universe after all, this game has a markedly creepier feel to it overall. Just play through the prologue of the game where the very first murder occurs, and you'll see what I mean. Since the horror angle is played up so much here, the amount of gore and disturbing content has increased significantly from the first game. Chaos Head certainly had some really graphic sequences, but it really pales in comparison to the events here. While most of it is communicated through its writing rather than its graphics, although there are some pretty scary images sprinkled throughout, it's more than enough to make you squirm. Those with weak constitutions, be warned. Speaking of the imagery, the art and style of the game is excellent, as expected of 5PB really, but Chaos Child does retain the somewhat blander character designs that Chaos Head had. They aren't bad by any stretch of the imagination, but when you compare them to other games from the studio, they look a lot more generic. Despite their blander looks, you really come to know and love the characters. I particularly like that Takuru is a much more relatable protagonist than Takumi in Chaos Head was. Sure, the weird hikikomori thing worked wonders in that game, but a repeat of the same thing would have been really tiresome. Takuru certainly has his own quirks and hang-ups, but I really liked him and wanted him and his friends to succeed. Chaos Child also did a great job of misdirecting me. Whenever I thought I knew where the plot was going, it would throw me way off track and kept me guessing until the end. After you get the first ending, you will unlock the ability to get the 4 heroine endings and then the true end, all of which fill in the extra gaps of the story and have some really shocking stuff in them. It's a lot of extra playtime to get all of these endings, and despite some revelations being a little underwhelming, it's well worth the effort to complete it all. It's not often that a game can make me laugh, cry, get scared, and get totally grossed out, but this one pulled it off seemingly effortlessly. A game of this sort really needs a solid soundtrack to get under the player's skin, and Chaos Child doesn't disappoint there. The tracks by Takashi Abo, who composed the rest of the science adventure titles, shift between upbeat to moody and creepy when necessary. This is definitely a game where you want to have the sound on, even if playing on the go with the Vita. The sound quality is kept up with the voice acting, which is all top-notch, and despite having a lot of female characters, they don't generally get super high-pitched or moe. They all have fairly realistic voices, which is much more suitable for this game's tone. Unfortunately for fans of English dubs, there isn't one available, which is basically standard for P-Cube at this point. Overall, I found Chaos Child an excellent visual novel, and one of the better ones in 5PB's science adventure series. It has a really creepy vibe to it, and it was interesting enough to spend many hours getting all of the endings. While the bland character designs, typos, and occasional meh reveals bring it down a little bit, it's definitely on my list of the best visual novels I've played, and I thoroughly recommend it to anyone that can handle the subject matter.